particular person was approved by, I think, a 97-0 vote, which in this political climate is something unheard of. Now, there are other conspiracy theories about what they could do. So, for example, if he can't get a nominee approved, and say the Democrats lose the election but gain the Senate, there's a 17-day period from the time the new Senate takes office in January of 2017 until the next president takes over, so he can nominate anyone if he had a Democratic Senate. I mean, talk about conspiracy theories. I just think the guy died. He is somebody who clearly was a little bit overweight, or more than a little overweight. He's 79 years of age. There are reports he had some chronic health problems. We assume possibly blood pressure, heart, the usual stuff. But if there's going to be a conspiracy theory, there's going to be one. And maybe it would be more reassuring to everybody to go through a more normal investigative process. I don't know.
Whoever gets in is going to probably have 3 additional seats to fill on the Supreme Court, because there's some folks, Ruth Bader Ginsburg, there's several people that are kind of getting up in years. So
Justice Kennedy, possibly Justice Thomas.
Well, Thomas never should have been in there in the first place. Just ask Anita Hill about Long Dong Silver.
I don't even want to get into this. This is just getting too crazy. You think that the WWE, Worldwide Wrestling Organization, gets crazy? If you haven't seen it yet, look for a replay of the last Republican debate. I think it's going to replace wrestling in ratings.
Yeah, they all agreed that they were all liars. They just couldn't agree on who was the biggest liar.
This was the pants on fire debate, and that place was in flames. Anyway, let's move on to our corner of the world. What I'm really happy is the fact that the discussion about Whitley Strieber's appearance in the Paracast has been mostly quite civil. You know, a lot of...
Yeah.
I expected a little more harsh criticisms, but there hasn't been that much.
Yeah, well, again, I think you pointed it out that we had to get beyond the debate of whether he was lying and making all this stuff up or not, and we'll just give him the benefit of the doubt. And that way, you know, we're not going to get bogged down and lose him in the first half hour that we got him on the show. So, you know, we had to defer to, you know, suspend our disbelief to some degree. But I think all in all, it went well. And I think people are responding to it very well. I've been told to go ahead and re-listen to it, which I never do re-listen to shows. I mean, they take too much of my time already, and having to get my schedule around some of these taping sessions. So, you know, I don't re-listen to shows. I may go back and re-listen to this one simply because I need a few things clarified in my own mind. But yeah, I think I appreciate people, you know, understanding the sensitive nature, you know, losing his wife and stuff, and being under attack for 30 years already. You know, I think people appreciated our kinder and gentler approach.
Also, whatever happened to him, and I can't pretend to know, I don't think it's a 30-year performance art project where he just made it up and kept this thing going on for 30 years. I think people have better things to do. And sure, perhaps he made a reasonable amount of money from the first couple of books and maybe that movie deal. But after that, I think it's been more of a negative than a positive. So it doesn't make sense to me. Just crazy things happen to people. And because he was in the position of being a best-selling author, what he had to say had resonance. But if there was no Whitley Strieber, we might still have a cultural meme of gray aliens. It would just come from somebody else. Maybe it was just time. I don't know. That's also another strange theory. In any case, there it is, folks. Will we have Whitley Strieber on the Paracast again? I don't know. If he has something else he wants to talk about, if there is interest from our listeners, I suppose we could ask him. But right now, I think we've covered the story as best we can.
Yep.
So let's move on. All right. We're getting back to a more traditional look at UFOs after looking at a lot of interesting alternatives like alternate realities and synchronicities and subjective experiences. We're going to bring back on this week's episode Peter Davenport of the National UFO Reporting Center. And he's got a lot of interesting things to talk about. One, of course, is recent sightings and the reports, for example, of red, orange, and yellow fireballs, sightings of clusters like that. And he says these reports do not involve so-called Chinese lanterns. And he also has a proposal on hand to develop some kind of UFO detection system using passive radar, folks. And that sounds interesting. So there's a lot to talk about with Peter Davenport, and he's waiting in the wings, and we'll get to him in the next segment. Let me get to this. We had a lot more detailed discussion about Whitley Strieber in this past week's episode of After the Paracast. That's a feature of the Paracast Plus. If you want to learn more about it, go to plus.theparacast.com. That's plus.theparacast.com. It's a low subscription fee, lots of great benefits, also the ad-free version of this show. So check it out, plus.theparacast.com. Peter Davenport coming up with Gene and Chris. You're in
The Paracast.
I know that a lot of our listeners are interested in UFOs, the issue of giant skeletons found in America, paranormal investigations, and what the top researchers think about such topics. One online magazine has been presenting such unusual information since 1985. It is Alternate Perceptions Magazine at apmagazine.info. Use their search function to find articles on just about every topic imaginable. That's apmagazine.info. Do you need a website? Well, you can get a great deal on hosting services with Namecheap's legendary coupon code. They're offering substantial hosting discounts on shared hosting, business hosting, VPS hosting, reseller hosting, and even dedicated servers. Namecheap is preferred by millions. It's backed by a money-back guarantee. Use the coupon code LEGENDARY to cash in on the special deal at Namecheap.com, Namecheap.com.
This is a healthcare alert from the Pain Relief Hotline. If you, a family member, or a loved one suffers from knee, back, shoulder, or ankle pain and have Medicare as your primary insurance, we've got great news. You don't have to suffer any longer. You can immediately qualify for a pain-relieving brace at little or no cost to you by calling our 24/7 Pain Relief Hotline at 866-389-0620. Delivery is free and all paperwork is handled for you. If you are on Medicare and have knee, back, shoulder, or ankle pain, don't wait. You can qualify to immediately receive a pain-relieving brace at little or no cost by calling our 24/7 Pain Hotline now at 866-389-0620. Our representatives are standing by 24/7 to take your call and rush you your pain-relieving brace at little or no cost to you. Shipping is free and all paperwork is handled for you. Just call 866-389-0620. That's 866-389-0620. Again, 866-389-0620.
Removing bad taste and odor from your drinking water is easy. Removing the bad stuff you don't taste is what ProPure does best. Water the way nature meant it to be. Clean, crisp, and refreshing. See the complete line of ProPure countertop, inline, gravity, and household water filtration products. Visit your authorized ProPure dealer or ProPureUSA.com. That's ProPureUSA.com. Or call 800-544-3533.
Are you sneezing, coughing, and aching? Do you have a sore throat, a fever, or the sniffles? There's no reason to be sick this cold and flu season with immune system support from Supernatural Silver. Supernatural Silver can give your body the help it needs to fight off harmful pathogens without hurting beneficial gut flora and without leaving behind resistant bacteria. Antibiotics can damage good microflora and often leave behind bacteria which can cause problems later on. If you're sick of being sick, Try Supernatural Silver. Supernatural Silver, the #1 choice of thousands for a safe and effective way to protect against the many diseases and illnesses that we are facing today. Go to supernaturalsilver.com, read our customer reviews, and see the life-changing results that people are having. That's supernaturalsilver.com. Supernaturalsilver.com. Use the promo code PROTECTED for 20% off your entire order. And like us on Facebook. Supernatural Silver.
This is Holly Thomas, Group Vice President of Cause Marketing for Macy's. Our company is working together with the March of Dimes through March for Babies to raise money and awareness about the serious problem of premature birth in the U.S. That's why Macy's is committed to raising funds through our employees, customers, family, and friends to improve the health of moms and babies everywhere. Won't you please join us in March for Babies? Start a team today at marchforbabies.org.
We'd like to hear from you. If you have a comment or question about the Paracast, send it to news@theparacast.com. That's news@theparacast.com. And don't forget to visit our famous Paracast community forums at forum.theparacast.com.
We're joined by Peter Davenport of the National UFO Reporting Center. It's been a while since we heard from him. In fact, 2013, as a matter of fact. So lots of things have happened. We're going to give you a UFO update on the latest sightings, latest theories, and about, Peter, your proposal for some kind of UFO detection system. We'll get to that later. But let me ask you here about UFO sightings in general. There's been a perception in recent years that we don't get as many cases as we used to. What's your perception of that?
Yeah, it's all wrong. There are many, many perceptions, many claims, all sorts of things that go on in ufology, and it's sort of interesting. I have a sort of a catbird seat on all of this. Most of those comments, most of those impressions, most of those claims, I find, just don't conform to the reality of the phenomenon as I see it. And there are very few people who spend as much time in a given day trying to collect UFO reports as I do. Interestingly, I'm just rereading, I suspect, a book published in 1956 by Edward J. Ruppel, who was the head of Blue Book back in the 1950s.
Sure.
And as I read his description of what was going on back then in 1950, 51, 52, it appears to be exactly the same thing that we're seeing today. The phenomenon appears to me not to have changed one whit. And I just last night was reading the section in which he comments that they were getting about 10 to 20 reports per day. Well, I'm getting more than that. I'm probably getting 20 to 30 reports per day. So the phenomenon has not changed since 1952.
Well, in those years, we had reports of radar visual sightings. And I haven't heard of much of that in recent years. Is it that they're not being reported or what?
Well, they're not being reported from the radar side because almost all radars in the United States are controlled by whom? By the U.S. government. They're either military radars or FAA radars. There are a few weather radars. I don't know if they're run by television stations or whether those stations just subscribe to government radar. The issue with radar is they're very expensive to acquire and they're pretty expensive to run because of the power consumption. And, of course, they have to be staffed by people who are watching the screen. But I'm not surprised that the government is not reporting radar sightings because it's the government, and they don't want you and me or our listeners to even think about the UFO phenomenon. They want us to remain naive with regard to the UFO, what's going on in the field of ufology. So I have posted radar sightings. In fact, one comes to mind immediately, and any of our listeners can look this up on the National UFO Reporting Center website, ufocenter.com. There was a beautiful radar visual sighting on I think it was the 22nd of June, year 2000. Aircraft was flying in the vicinity of Rhode Island, Providence, Rhode Island, had an object go right by him. He called the FAA air traffic control system, and they confirmed that they could see now an object tracking his airplane. So there are radar visual sightings from time to time.
What about the nature of the objects themselves? The same kind of objects we saw then, or has there been a change? Obviously, these fireballs that we're going to talk about indicate some sort of change, though we had that then.
Yeah, it's very interesting to see trends, to see changes, variations in the type of objects that are being reported. And interestingly, Gene, I can date this change fairly accurately. It's not as though we had not taken such reports before. It's just that they increased in frequency and increased to a dramatic degree. I'm sure if we were talking statistics, it would be a statistically significant increase. But we're talking, and you're correct, it's the issue of clusters of fireballs. And I'll direct our listeners to a few of the really interesting cases here in a moment. It was about the last week in May of 2012. We suddenly started receiving reports of clusters of fireballs, cluster being anywhere from 2 to 200 of these red, orange, yellow, amber, and gold fireballs that started pouring in here. In fact, people can see the beginning. One of the early reports was from the 1st of June, 2012, from a St. Louis police officer who was driving south of St. Louis on an interstate, I think Interstate 55 it is. And as he and his wife and their infant child were driving to the south, he was quite shocked, quite surprised to look off to his quartering right to the southwest and see a cluster of about a dozen or 14 orange lights moving very rapidly from his right to left, so they were going to the east. He started to slow down, I think he writes in his report, and other people obviously were looking at these objects too, because there was some kind of collision of vehicles on the interstate, and he had to quickly pull over and go into his police officer mode, investigating or tending to potential injuries.
Peter, let me interrupt real quick. Was it because people were not keeping their eyes on the road? They were watching this particular phenomenal event, or?
That may be the case, although I haven't talked to those other people, so I can't confirm that. But this officer said, he had an interesting comment. He's a practicing Christian, and he said this sighting of whatever those objects were just shook his belief system to the roots of his soul. It's a very interesting comment. He was a very eloquent, I suspect, highly reliable witness. And people can see that report on our website, again, for the 1st of June, 2012. There's some interesting reports, similar reports from the next day, June 2nd, 2012, from Beacon Rock State Park here in the state of Washington, where I am. Several groups reported a sighting of a cluster of orange objects that were flying to the east up the Columbia River. This is probably 20 miles east of Portland, Oregon. And the objects got to their general location just above the river, and suddenly the orange objects made a distinct turn to the north, and went streaking off into the night sky. People can read, again, the 2nd of June, 2012.
That doesn't sound like Chinese lanterns to me.
No, and what you've cited is the very argument that a lot of people level against this phenomenon. They're saying, they're Chinese lanterns, or otherwise known as sky lanterns or Japanese lanterns. And I'm fairly sure that some of these reports of clusters of objects may be due to the launch of sky lanterns. I address this in my public presentations and show video of what a launch of sky lanterns looks like.
Let's do the rest of that in our next segment. We have to do a brief break with Peter Davenport of the National UFO Reporting Center. We're talking about these unusual fireballs connected to the UFO phenomenon. With Gene and Chris, you're in
the Paracast.
Thank you for listening to GCN. Be sure to visit GCNlive.com today.
So you've got to take a state construction license exam or certification. Can't decide on what books or what chapters to study? Discover right now how you can eliminate unnecessary books and wasted study time. At contractorexam.com, our study materials zero in on state-required test topics in an effective, multiple-choice format. So whether you're a plumber, electrician, general contractor, or other construction-related trade, contractorexam.com will help get you prepared. Visit us at www.contractorexam.com today.
Paid non-attorney spokesperson Adam Pulaski of the Pulaski Law Firm with principal office in Houston, Texas is the attorney responsible for the content of this ad. This ad is not legal advice, and the choice of a lawyer should not be based solely upon advertisement. Services may not be available in all states. Attention Xarelto users. If you or a loved one took Xarelto and suffered a serious bleeding event, you may be entitled to financial compensation. Xarelto is a popular prescription blood thinner used to prevent blood clots and protect patients from strokes. These serious bleeding events have led to numerous cases of hospitalization and even death. Phone lines are open 24/7. Call 800-261-0937. That's 800-261-0937.
Hi, this is Dr. Joel Wallach, the Mineral Doctor. You've heard me talk about 90 for Life for years. 60 minerals, 16 vitamins, 12 amino acids, 2 fatty acids. You may not know this, that I've actually designed Arthrodex for animals. That's right. Your pets need 90 for Life too. Get this essential pet product by calling 877-279-9422. That's 877-279-9422. Again, 877-279-9422.
Ted Anderson telling you about Jordan Rubin's Beyond Organic Green-Fed Raw Cheddar Artesian Cheese featuring whole milk created through ancient dairy breeding, unpasteurized, untreated whole milk on the same farm the cows graze, containing natural sources of omega-3s, CLA protein, calcium, probiotics, and enzymes. I have never tasted cheese this good, and you need to try it. Contact your Longevity distributor or call 877-878-4203 or go to gcnteam.com. Looking for that edge during those intimate moments? We see many ads for enhancement, but the side effects include death. At GCN Team, we should change the Healthy Body, Brain, and Heart Pack to the Healthy Libido Pack. The brain and heart are not the only organs that require a healthy vascular system. For proper blood flow at the right moment, go to GCNteam.com or call 877-878-4203. That's 877-878-4203. That's 877-878-4203.
Is negative content or comments on the web affecting your personal or professional reputation? Unfavorable comments, embarrassing pictures, videos, legal documents, and negative articles can ruin your personal life, your career, or your business. It happens a lot, and it's just not fair. But what can you do? ReputationDefender.com can help protect your good name. Get a free consultation now. Call 800-831-0771. That's 800-831-0771. Call right now for a free expert reputation analysis. It's easy to squash the unfair attacks with our patented system, and the analysis is absolutely free. Make the best things about you jump out in searches. Protect your personal and professional reputation, your business, and your income. Get your free reputation analysis from ReputationDefender.com right now. Call 800-831-0771. 800-831-0771. That's 800-831-0771. Or visit ReputationDefender.com today.
Attention citizens. This man has received national attention for accurately predicting every major financial trend, including the market crash of 2008. His name is Harry Dent. And in his newly released book, he is making even bigger and bolder predictions that have the potential to devastate the world economy and your personal wealth. You can get a free copy of Harry Dent's bestseller, The Demographic Cliff, containing never-before-published information by simply visiting www.harrydentresearch.com. Again, that's www.harrydentresearch.com.
Hi, this is Joshua P. Warren, author of The Poor Man's Paranormal, and you're listening to the Paracast, the gold standard of paranormal radio.
With Gene and Chris in the Paracast, we have Peter Davenport of the National UFO Reporting Center. Now, just as a point of reference here, if UFOs are solid metallic objects, what are the fireballs about? Are they just projecting lights or what?
You know, if I knew the answer to your question, Gene, I'd probably have a Nobel Prize to my name.
Well, I think we can assume in some cases, guys, that we're looking at some sort of plasma effect, some sort of ionization effect that seems to surround TRUFOs, if you will. Oftentimes you'll have these types of effects, especially if you're in a moisture-laden environment.
I think that's not an unreasonable assertion, but we don't know for sure yet. And in fact, it is not just I who is talking about these phenomena. It's not just I who's collecting such reports. I talk infrequently to Roger Marsh, who is the editor of the UFO Journal for MUFON, monthly publication, of course. And he and I agree, and in fact, MUFON, I think predicated on these reports, has tasked a state director. In fact, it's Erica Lukes, state director for MUFON for the state of Utah, who is now actively investigating these. I've shared some cases with her, trying to get to the bottom of just what these things are. The reason I'm even talking about this phenomenon is because we don't understand what they are, and they don't seem to conform to any kind of terrestrial phenomenon that I can think of, with the exception of the Chinese lanterns. But I think we can rule out Chinese lanterns for the following several reasons. Number one, oftentimes these objects are seen maneuvering in different directions. If it were a cluster of Chinese lanterns, they would be drifting with the prevailing winds aloft, which usually are laminar and not chopped up and not carrying objects in different directions. Not impossible, of course, but usually winds aloft are moving in one direction at a constant velocity. Also, some of these objects are seen to suddenly accelerate dramatically and go streaking over the horizon. Yeah. Clearly not any kind of Chinese lantern or drifting body.
The rapid acceleration especially sounds mystifying, yes.
Well, this kind of reminds me of some very impressive footage that Jaime Maussan had. It's kind of sprinkled in amongst all the obvious hoaxes and misidentified natural phenomena, that sort of thing, birds, whatever. And this was a daylight sighting, I believe, over Mexico with a fairly large glowing orange object that seemed to be shooting out like a Roman candle from either end of the object, was shooting out smaller orange objects that would then fly away. And there were quite a number of them that seemed to be ejected. For the life of me, I really have never seen anything like it. It was actually very good footage, and I personally feel that it was a legitimate phenomenal event that was actually captured optically. Some of these fireball sightings, of course, are being reported during the day. These are not only nocturnal sighting events, and that would obviously kind of lean away from any sort of man-made Chinese lantern or something akin to that. But have you seen that footage, Peter? I'm sure you have. Very riveting from about, I think, 2010, maybe 2009, if I remember. Very, very impressive footage.
Yeah, I haven't seen that footage. If it's on the internet, I'll try to see it.
Yeah, it's on YouTube.
Just to share with our listeners the volume of such reports that have occurred. Well, it started, as I mentioned earlier, in late May of 2012, approximately. We're almost to May in 2016. So in the last approximately 44 months or so, the National UFO Reporting Center has posted between 12,000 and 15,000 such reports to our website.
Wow.
And it's the most frequent subject of conversation when I do a presentation on UFOs or when I post a statement to our website. It is more often than not about one of these very dramatic sightings. If listeners would like to look at some of the really interesting sightings, I would call to their attention a very special report, special because it comes from a retired U.S. astronaut who lives in Athens, Texas. That's about 70 miles southeast of Dallas. On the 5th of July, 2013. So we were about 14 months into this phenomenon when this report came in. Received a call from a gentleman who described himself as a retired astronaut. In fact, I've investigated, and he is who he says he is. On that evening, he was standing outside with his wife and their adult daughter. He was facing the west. His wife was facing east. And she called to him and said, "Honey, what's this?" And he wheeled around. just in time to see, he describes, an orange fireball streak over his head. He followed it visually as it moved very rapidly to the west, and she said, here comes another one. He turned around, here's a second orange fireball. All told, they witnessed, I believe it was 6 red or red-orange fireballs that night. I talked to him on several occasions, as you can well imagine. He would be perceived to be an excellent source of objective, reliable information. Indeed, he is, I believe. And he said, at one point in our conversation, he said, Peter, he said, I don't know what those objects were, but he said, I feel very comfortable in assuring you that they were not manufactured on our planet.
Let me ask you something here, which is also important. We're seeing these fireballs in the sky. How close do they seem to get?
Yeah, that's a very interesting question. We just posted a graphic image from a witness, I think in Pennsylvania, I'm going on memory now, who saw 4 or 6 of these fireballs. They were the perceived size of a full moon to the witnesses. Now, that's a pretty prominent object in the night sky, but your question is a very good one, Gene. It's very pertinent. You always want to know how far away and therefore how big were the actual objects. What was their actual dimension? You can't know that unless you can know your distance from them. But the problem is, almost invariably, and this is one of the great mysteries of the fireball phenomenon, one of the great mysteries is even in those instances where there's a dramatic display of a dozen or 2 dozen or 3 dozen orange objects, we get only almost invariably just one report about it. The question I ask is, what are those other witnesses who no doubt have seen the same display thinking about what they're looking at?
Well, the thing I wonder about too, Peter, not to interrupt you, is how many people even look up anymore? They're too busy looking at their iPhones.
Well, I think it's not a question. That may be the case, and I've often mused and ruminated on that point, Gene. But I think it is more like the case that when people see something anomalous, really very flabbergasting, they're either inclined to forget it or file it away in the deep recess of their memory, or just decide that they're not going to get involved, or they don't want to spend the time, or they're just lazy. And I think the last element that I cite there explains it all. They don't want to take the time to find an organization like the UFO Center to report it, where even though it takes only about 5 strokes on a keyboard and hitting the return button to find a UFO reporting agency like mine, the National UFO Reporting Center, or MUFON, or UFOs Northwest, or there are a whole bunch of them today who will accept reports. But even when they call over the UFO hotline, which we've maintained since 1974, and we ask them to submit a written report, more often than not, that's too much work for them.
Yeah, they can't be bothered.
Well, this is the whole way the society is now. We're so inundated with survival. Everything else takes a back seat. Let's get to more of this with Peter Davenport. And Gene and Chris, you're in
the Paracast.
Thank you for listening to GCN. Be sure to visit GCNlive.com today.
Conspiracy Journal is your #1 source for the hidden world of the weird and strange. We bring you thought-provoking and controversial material for free-thinking individuals who are seeking what is really going on in our world today. Some of this material may adversely affect you. Other pieces are meant to enlighten. Either way, be prepared to be intrigued by such things as the reality of UFOs, ghosts, strange creatures from time and space, hidden conspiracies, time travel, Nikola Tesla, suppressed technology, and a whole lot more. You can find out more by visiting our website at conspiracyjournal.com. There you can sign up for our free weekly newsletter sent directly to your email address. Find out what they don't want you to know.
Owe $10,000 or more to the IRS?
Get on board with the Tax Admiral. Don't take on the IRS alone. I'll cut penalties and reduce your overall tax bill. Sometimes I can even get it zeroed out completely.
We're an A-rated company helping people clean up their mess with the IRS.
If you owe $10,000 or more, then call the Tax Admiral.
Call 800-287-7180. Again, that's 800-287-7180. 800-287-7180.
This is Dan Pilla. Do you owe the IRS money you can't pay? Are tax debts crippling you? I've defended people from the IRS for over 30 years. I've helped thousands, and I can help you too. I wrote the book on IRS settlement, and I'm telling you, there's no such thing as a hopeless case. Call 800-34-NO-TAX to finally get free of IRS debt. With the IRS's new programs, there's never been a better time to solve your problem. Call 800-34-NO-TAX. That's 800-34-NO-TAX, or my website, danpilla.com.
Are your Google search results killing you? Unflattering content in blogs, news articles, online reviews, social media, or other sources can jeopardize your reputation, your business, and your livelihood. Let Reputation.com help. Our patented technology will make the truth about you more visible while pushing down unwanted negative content. Improve your Google search results. Call Reputation.com at 1-800-831-0771 for a free consultation. That's 800-831-0771.
Are you worried about your mom or dad living alone in their house? Hi, I'm Joan London. Listen, I know how difficult it is to find senior care for someone you love. That's why I recommend a free service called A Place for Mom. They are the nation's largest senior living referral service. Call A Place for Mom today.
To receive free information on senior living communities in your area, call A Place for Mom at 1-800-704-6182.
A Place for Mom offers free one-on-one advice from local advisors and a personalized list of senior living communities you can visit. If you have questions about senior care for your mom or dad, there's a place for answers, A Place for Mom.
Call A Place for Mom in the next 10 minutes to get your free ebook on financing senior care as well as free information on senior living communities in your area. Call 1-800-704-6182. That's 1-800-704-6182.
Attention citizens. This man has received national attention for accurately predicting every major financial trend, including the market crash of 2008. His name is Harry Dent. And in his newly released book, he is making even bigger and bolder predictions that have the potential to devastate the world economy and your personal wealth. You can get a free copy of Harry Dent's bestseller, The Demographic Cliff, containing never-before-published information by simply visiting www.harrydentresearch.com. Again, that's www.harrydentresearch.com.
This is Leslie Kane, and I'm with the Coalition for Freedom of Information, and you are listening to the Paracast.
On the Paracast with Gene Steinberg, Christopher O'Brien, we have Peter Davenport of the National UFO Reporting Center. So kind of clarify this for me. At first, when I asked you about the frequency of sightings and the kind of sightings, you said they really hadn't changed that much from the 1950s and Captain Ruppelt's book, The Report on Unidentified Flying Objects. But this fireball phenomenon seems to be more prevalent now than it used to be. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Absolutely. It has grown in intensity to a point that it tends to alarm me, Gene. We have a phenomenon, a major phenomenon, as viewed from my vantage point, that is taking place, and we have a government that is saying absolutely nothing about it, and moreover, it is a phenomenon for which no UFO organization has any satisfactory explanation. Another case that comes to mind is particularly representative of this phenomenon. It's the 28th of March, 2013. Glendale, Arizona, a retired Arizona Highway Patrol officer was standing in his house in Glendale. Glendale is on the west side of greater Phoenix area.
I'm about an hour from there.
Yeah, he was looking to the north and admiring a beautiful, clear nighttime sky, and suddenly an orange fireball streaked from his left to his right, that is, from west to east in the northern sky, from his vantage point inside his house. It was so shocking a sighting for him, so surprising that he rushed outside to see if he could see this object disappearing towards the east. Well, he got out on his deck on the north side of his house and was viewing. He couldn't find the object. It had been moving so fast that it was gone from his sight by the time he got outside. But as he was standing on his deck, another cluster of several of them followed the same pathway across the sky that the first one had. And then another cluster, and another cluster, and another cluster. All told, about 150, he estimates, orange objects. And one witness, one report. How can it be, I asked rhetorically.
Over the fifth largest metropolitan area in the country.
Yeah. How can it be that an alleged event like this takes place, and I have to use alleged as a formality. There was no question remaining in my mind based on my 2 or 3 conversations with this gentleman that he was reporting truthfully. He said, he made the point, I seem to recall, that he really had no benefit from reporting this. He was on retirement from the Arizona Highway Patrol duty that he had had for 35 years. He said, there's no advantage for me to report this, Mr. Davenport, but what I saw, I have no explanation for. And again, people don't have to believe what I'm saying. I was born in Missouri 68 years ago. In fact, I lived in Ferguson, Missouri as a young kid.
I have to ask you about that sometime, but not now.
That's the show me state. And for me, it's a very important principle, not only because of my birthright, but because of my training as a scientist. The only thing that matters to me is data. Data and evidence and corroboration and all of that. This was a very, very good sighting. And again, it takes us back to the mystery of how an event like this can occur, but there's only one report. How many tens of thousands of people must have seen the same thing, but they have not reported it? And it underscores my suspicion, my estimate, Gene, would be that out of about 20,000 Americans who see a phenomenon similar to what this retired state patrol officer allegedly witnessed, out of 20,000 people who see a dramatic event like that, only one will ever come forward and report it.
Well, let me ask you something here. And this is an ultimate question about UFOs and subjectivity, and it's more involved than maybe we wanted to get into. But if you put 10 people out there in the field, you would maintain that if there was a fireball overhead or 100 fireballs, all 10 people, assuming they have normal visual acuity, etc., and they're looking in the same place, would see precisely the same thing?
Well, they would see the same thing, of course, depending on the quality of their vision. The question is what they would report if they reported it. And again, I make the point, and this is an important one, even the most important for our listeners. I would say probably 30% of the people listening to this program have seen UFOs, and only 1 in 20,000 of those listeners has ever reported it. So we can't post the reports unless we receive them. But out of 10 people who saw the likes of which that law enforcement officer saw on the 28th of September 2013, probably not one of them would report it. That's not a number of witnesses large enough to have at least one of them report it.
Let's put the request out there. We've got quite a few listeners here, a lot of whom live in the Arizona area. This is September 28th, 2013.
Yes.
What time again, sir?
It was an evening sighting, and I seem to recall it was about 9 o'clock, but people can find that report on our website. That's why we post all of these reports, of course.
Okay.
So people may share it.
Around 9 p.m. Mountain Time, September 28th, 2013, in and around Glendale, Arizona. We have listeners in Arizona. If any one of you out there saw something strange that day, please let us know. You could contact Peter at the National UFO Reporting Center. You could check out the Paracast. We have contact us links all over the place on our site. Let us know. We'll try to get this coordinated, because that's a problem. I mean, if one person reports something wacky, however credible that person is, there's always going to be a way to say, well, he saw something or something happened to him that is beyond our ken, and maybe that's why other people didn't see it. But as soon as 2 people see it, 5 people, 10 people, we can put together something consistent. So let's see what happens. We'll put the call out there and see if we can get any response.
Yeah. But the problem is now, we're almost 3 years after the event, of course, 2.5 years anyway. The problem now is most people will have forgotten it, or it will have gone into deep memory, and they won't remember the date. If a person doesn't report a UFO sighting within 24 to 48 hours, when I talk to them about their sighting, more often than not, I would say, and that's a guess, more often than not, they don't even remember the day or date or day of week or any of that information. The time and date of a sighting is one of the fastest things, or one of the soonest things, to disappear from the witness's memory. They remember where they were, interestingly. People have a very good locational memory. They don't have a good temporal memory. It's an interesting statement about human psychology.
What about then, this is another thing attacked by the skeptics, the reliability of human testimony, especially something that's unexpected. And we have, the old law school experiment, where they stage something for the students and everybody has a different answer. So when you look at multiple witnesses of something like this, we can talk about multiple witness sightings. And we have about 1.5 minutes for the segment, so if I'm rushing you, forgive me.
No,
what
right.
sort of variation do we see in descriptions?
Well, that's the interesting thing. Multiple sighting reports are probably the most interesting. The Phoenix Lights down in your area is probably the most dramatic example of multiple witnesses over a large area reporting the same phenomenon over an extended period of time. And in fact, maybe after the break we can talk about the Phoenix Lights in detail, if that's not whipping a dead horse back to his feet, because it's been talked about so often. But multiple witness cases are very useful because it allows us to triangulate on the objects. In other words, 2 or more witnesses looking at the same object at the same time can draw lines in the direction they're looking. All those lines will intersect, and that will help us calculate how far away from the witnesses the object was, and therefore what its size was.
I think the basic question I'm asking, though, and maybe we can flesh this out in our next segment where we will cover a little bit about the Phoenix Lights, and that is the variation in the testimony, the specific factual variations of different people, different backgrounds, seeing what may or may not be the same thing, and that's something we'll have to get into. We have Peter Davenport of the National UFO Reporting Center joining us in the Paracast this week. We're coming up on a 10th anniversary show. That's going to be kind of a work in progress. Let's see how that turns out to be. Doing this for 10 years. Can you believe it? With Gene and Chris, you're in the Paracast.
Thank you for listening to GCN. Visit GCNlive.com today.
Attack of the Rockoids has been well received by critics and readers alike. It's a thrill-a-minute story you'll never forget. A former U.S. military intelligence officer is haunted by intense dreams about a beautiful woman pleading for his help after a terrible battle in outer space. But the dreams turn out to be true and thrust him into a telepathic love affair with a woman whose faraway planet is intent on destroying the Earth. And now the gripping tale continues in The Coming of the Protectors. It's the second book of the Rockoids trilogy, a galaxy-spanning adventure that pits our hapless heroes against powerful, fanatical enemies that threaten the lives of freedom-loving beings everywhere. Attack of the Rockoids and The Coming of the Protectors. Classic science fiction at its best, available now. For more details, visit rockoids.com. That's ROCKOIDS.com.
pick up the receiver. With your heart racing and sweat dripping from your forehead, you finally muster the courage to dial the number to call into your favorite talk radio show. It rings once, twice, and then...
Hello, it's GCN. What's your name and the state you're calling from?
Surprised you got through, you squeak out.
Jason from Minnesota.
Please hold.
As you patiently wait for your turn, you begin to daydream about being a famous talk radio host and what it would be like to have your own show.
Jason from Minnesota, you're up.
Millions of loyal listeners worldwide waiting to call and talk to you.
Caller, are you there?
Cheering crowds surround you, calling out your name.
Jason! Jason! Going once, twice. Okay, we gotta move on to the next caller.
You blew it.
Huh? Wait, no!
Interact with the host you're listening to right now, online at GCNlive.com. Click on the community link. Engage with other listeners. Ask questions. Start debates. Don't agree with the host? Let them know. Be a part of the community at GCNlive.com.
Welcome back to the Paracast, the gold standard of paranormal radio. And now, here's Gene Steinberg.
Before we continue with Peter Davenport, the National UFO Reporting Center, let me remind you that we have a second radio show for you to check out called After the Paracast. If you want to know more, just look to plus.theparacast.com. The Paracast Plus includes After the Paracast, show transcripts, videos, the ad-free version of this show, no network ads, all that for a low subscription price, plus.theparacast.com. So the question I posed to Peter Davenport in our last segment was the variation. How much of a variation do we see of people who appear to be seeing the same thing? Of course, you're talking about coordinating location, but what about verbal descriptions?
Yeah, there is always variation. When you're dealing with human beings, we are not particularly skilled at watching something and then memorizing it, and then reporting it exactly as it occurred. Your suggestion that you're mentioning the law school examples of how poor eyewitnesses are. However, I would cite the two cases that I focused on make it 4 cases. The police officer in St. Louis, June 1st, 2012, very good witness, very reliable. He said, look, Peter, I have nothing to gain by reporting this. In fact, everything to lose, including my job. But what I saw was so flabbergasting that I feel duty-bound to report it to an organization like yours. The next day, the 2nd of June, 2012, Beacon Rock State Park, it was 3 groups of campers, all of whom reported essentially the same thing at the same time. That's a very good report. A retired U.S. astronaut. Is that a pretty reliable person? I think so. Retired, there's nobody who has a sword of Damocles poised over his neck. And I asked him how good his vision was, and he said it's probably still 2015. So he got a good eyeball on those 6 objects that went over his head. And a retired Arizona Highway Patrol officer, you'd have to talk to him, Gene, to really understand how convincing this gentleman was. I tend to trust his report implicitly. So sometimes eyewitnesses are good. Your point is well taken, though. I wish the quality of the reports, both oral reports over the hotline and follow-up written reports over our website, were more thorough, more accurate, more carefully prepared, and so on. But you're dealing with the public. When you deal with the public, you have to roll with the punches.
Right, and you're dealing, for the most part, I would say the bulk of reports are from untrained witnesses. You're mentioning examples from trained observers who you would think would have a little bit better ability to recall exact details. One thing that I've noticed in my work over the years is when a sighting event is shared by a group of people, and when you interview them separately, the variation tends to be the actual duration. Some people think it happens very quickly. Other people, time seems to slow down. So you have kind of a variation in the actual duration of the event. And then the other thing that I've noticed too is people sometimes confuse what happened first, then what happened second, third, fourth, that sort of thing. People tend to jumble that up a little bit. For the most part, descriptions, I think, are fairly accurate in terms of color, size, motion, but it's the actual sequence of events and the time duration that seems to ebb and flow a little bit.
Yeah. One of the things that happens, too, is when people see something that they perceive to be really anomalous, the emotion gets involved in it. An emotional witness is not as rock solid as a person who has the self-discipline to remain objective and factual and just record the event as it appears to that witness.
It was beaming me. I knew I was there. I felt a connection.
Yeah, the touchy and feely part of any sighting, and it occurs to all of us. I've seen UFOs before, and because of my familiarity with the field and my training as a scientist, I was able to get the hard facts, the time, the duration, the angles, the angle of elevation, and so on and so forth. Some of the other people who were with me are not as highly trained in scientific observation as I may be, and we had slightly different renditions with regard to how long it lasted, how much of the sky the object covered during the 5 seconds that we witnessed it, and so on and so forth. So it takes a little bit of training to be a really good observer of an event and report it factually.
And the problem we have with UFOs is we can't predict when the event will occur, so we can't always have the trained observer there. But let me move on to Phoenix Lights, and I don't want to beat a dead horse. We had this covered a couple of 3 times in the early days of the Paracast. So looking at it, an event from the 1990s here in 2016, what should we know today, absent all the mysticism that has arisen about it, about the Phoenix Lights and their impact in terms of UFO events?
Yeah, there are a couple things I can mention. Number one, we're going to have a convention up here in McMinnville, Oregon in mid-May of 2016 that will focus on the Phoenix Lights if anybody's particularly interested in that event. And they should.
But why up there and not in Phoenix?
Well, because the McMinnville Festival is held in McMinnville, Oregon, southwest of Portland, and they've just taken an interest in it. A lot of past speakers have alluded to it, and they just decided that it would be interesting to focus on it and have all the speakers address or share with their audience what they experienced as a result of that mass sighting. The other thing, this is the take-home message. We have good evidence, and I've played this tape before, of my conversation with a U.S. Air Force airman who was involved in the scramble of 2 F-15 fighters to pursue some of these objects that were being reported to the Air Force that Thursday night. And the other message is that the U.S. military forces, we have pretty good reason to believe, were elevated from Defense Condition 5, which is the lowest condition in that system. The military forces around the world, I presume, were elevated from DEFCON 5 to DEFCON 3 in one step. Also, and I don't know if I've reported this on Paracast before, but we have reason to believe, or suspicion to believe, surmise, that the injury that President William Jefferson Clinton sustained in Florida that night may have been related to the declaration of a DEFCON 3. After all, DEFCON 3, I don't know much about DEFCON statuses, but DEFCON 3, I'm told, is one step short of global warfare.
Okay, so are you saying then that he had this episode as a cover story?
One of two possibilities.
Yeah, or they were hustling him out of a room and he hit his head or something.
Well, it was his knee, and he allegedly sustained an injury that allegedly required him to be spirited back to the Washington, D.C. area so he could undergo surgery on damaged ligaments, I presume it was, at the Bethesda Naval Hospital. Well, that's what the government says. That's what Bill Clinton, publicity manager, says. However, let's look at it from a different vantage point. The biggest UFO event in the history of ufology, that's what the Phoenix Lights were. People from all over Phoenix, from surrounding communities and neighboring states, were reporting gigantic objects that were not just streaking overhead, they were hovering overhead. Even Governor Fife Symington, finally, 10 years later, thanks to the nice work by Leslie Keene, admitted that he had one of these objects go over him. That's a pretty reliable witness by my measure.
You know, when it comes to a politician, though, I tend not to give them a lot of credibility, especially because he had a very checkered history. And speaking of Bill Clinton actually pardoned him for the crimes of which he was convicted. So, you know, we could say, yeah, he admitted it later and maybe he was telling the truth. But when it comes to politicians in Arizona, just be cautious, my friend. With Gene and Chris and Peter Davenport, you're in the Paracast. Do you need a website? Well, you can get a great deal on hosting services with Namecheap's legendary coupon code. They're offering substantial hosting discounts on shared hosting, business hosting, VPS hosting, reseller hosting, and even dedicated servers. Namecheap is preferred by millions. It's backed by a money-back guarantee. Use the coupon code LEGENDARY to cash in on the special deal at Namecheap.com, Namecheap.com.
First came Attack of the Rockoids, and it was a critically acclaimed success. And now there's The Coming of the Protectors. A former military intelligence man is contacted by a space woman in a dream that turns out to be a nightmare because evil forces on her distant planet are planning to conquer the Earth. This is gripping science fiction of the classic kind. Attack of the Rockoids and The Coming of the Protectors. Find out more at rockoids.com. That's Rockoids, ROCKOIDS.com.
Hi, this is Dr. Joel Wallach, the Mineral Doctor. You've heard me talk about 90 for life for years. 60 minerals, 16 vitamins, 12 amino acids, 2 fatty acids. You may not know this, that I've actually designed Arthur decks for animals. That's right. Your pets need 90 for life too. Get this essential pet product by calling 877-279-9422. That's 877-279-9422. Again, 877-279-9422.
You haven't experienced yogurt until you've tried a Mossy, embodying health and flavor in a true whole milk, green-fed dairy beverage. Every sip pays homage to our old world cows and the ancient culturing methods their milk benefits from. With over 30 probiotics, a Mossy's undeniably nutritious, refined, cultured sensation bolsters your health and awakens your passion for dairy. A Mossy's so good, and you need to try it. Contact your Longevity distributor or call 877-878-4203 or go to gcnteam.com.
Today, more than ever, it's imperative that you protect your digital privacy. EDEC Digital Forensics Signal Blocking Anti-Radiation Anti-Surveillance Faraday Bags shield the contents of your phones, tablets, and key fobs from 4G, Wi-Fi, GPS, Bluetooth, NFC, and more. Find us at edecdf.com/radio or call us now at 805-222-4584. That's 805-222-4584. Radio listeners get 20% off your order.
Are you tired of commuting to a job that makes someone else rich? Working harder than ever, but getting nowhere? Do you hate spending hundreds of dollars every week on daycare? Having someone else raise your children? With our opportunities, you can start earning money as soon as next week. You get to be the boss, work from home, and live a happier life. At Be the Boss Network, you'll find hundreds of work-from-home opportunities that you can literally start today and be earning money as soon as next week. Go to freedom106.com and start earning money as soon as next week. You get to be the boss. Get out of the rat race. Work from home. Go to freedom106.com right now and change your life today. That's freedom, the number 106.com. Go to freedom106.com and start earning money as soon as next week. You be the boss. Go to freedom106.com.
Most of you know that heart disease is the #1 silent killer in the U.S. What if I told you for just $54.95 a month you could fight against heart disease naturally? At Heart and Body Extract, we've been helping thousands of people get back to a healthier heart. Don't just take my word for it. Check out all of the success stories at hbextract.com, or to order, call 866-295-5305. That's 866-295-5305. hbextract.com. Don't risk it when you can take charge of it.
We'd like to hear from you. If you have a comment or question about the Paracast, send it to news@theparacast.com. That's news@theparacast.com. And don't forget to visit our famous Paracast community forums at forum.theparacast.com.
As Chris is weakening by the second here, we have Peter Davenport of the National UFO Reporting Center. Understand, I wasn't trying to denigrate the credibility of what you were saying. Just need to be realistic about the politicians.
Well, I think you were being justifiably cynical. I just would like to remind listeners that I happen to be in Casa Grande, just south, about halfway, about a third of the way from Phoenix to Tucson, right off I-10, watching the NCAA basketball tournament when the object flew directly over us. And I went outside after seeing the news break in during a commercial break, saying, having the guy standing there with the flares or whatever it was coming on over Phoenix. And I'm thinking to myself, oh my God. And I ran outside and there were people out in the parking lot saying, oh, you missed it. It flew right over. And I could have run outside and been right underneath it too, but I was too busy watching basketball.
Yeah. And interestingly, Chris, thanks for that story. But I would like all of that reduced to written form. Would love to get a report from you. Even though you didn't see it, you were a witness to many, many other people who did.
Yeah,
and
that's true.
You're one of the 19,999 who have not reported a UFO event, and would love to have that written down and shared with us.
Yeah, I happen to be working in Casa Grande. I was down from Colorado, and I was supposed to actually the following night have dinner with Tom King and Stephen Greer and Sherry Adamak and Bill Hamilton and others. And it just serendipity. I was just too focused on watching I think it was the Final Four actually at that point, or it may have been I think ASU was in the tournament that year, one of the Arizona schools. And there were people outside just like scratching their heads going, the thing was huge. I just, to this day, I kick myself. I could have really had, the sighting of a lifetime, and just, oh well.
Well, we have a very interesting report from a woman, her husband, their 2 children, and her mother, I think mother or mother-in-law was in the back with the 2 children. They were driving to the northwest towards Phoenix from Tucson, and they had the object that I suspect went over Casa Grande go right over them, headed the other direction. They were below it for an estimated 1 to 2 minutes. And Stacy says, you've probably heard about this gal, maybe even had her on as a witness or a guest on the Paracast, but she reports that it completely covered the sky from one horizon to the other as it went over them. She emphasizes how large it was. I use her hand-drawn illustration in my slide presentations to let people know just how large that object was. But it went right down Interstate 10, headed southeast towards Tucson, and went over Casa Grande. They were in Casa Grande, too, when that object went over them.
We don't want Chris to spank himself for missing it. Now, I should point out I was living in Scottsdale at the time. I was busy writing a book about using computers, and thus I had no concern about UFOs. Didn't consider it. Maybe saw it in the paper the very next day. Any case. Now, after all these years, is there anything new that has come out about the case beyond what we've already covered?
Well, what we learned about the case on the night of the event, I would argue, gives us enough evidence to recognize just how dramatic an event it was. The event started in Henderson, Nevada, on the southeast corner of Las Vegas, of course. And those objects were seen by several witnesses to be flying to the southeast. So it was not just a Phoenix-related event. That was sort of a culmination, maybe even an early stage of the event. It was the event that Chris just alluded to, the fact that one of these objects went down Interstate 10, went almost all the way, as far as I know. I don't know all of the details on the matter, but went all the way to Tucson because we had reports from people who were very close to Davis-Monthan Air Force Base, which of course is just east of Tucson.
Right. I think it made a turn to the west and disappeared somewhere around Yuma, if I remember.
Yeah, and
and it came all the way down the Prescott Valley. I mean, it came down from Ash Fork all the way down Chino Valley, Prescott Valley, Dewey. It skirted right on the eastern side of the Bradshaw Mountains over the Crown King area, and then it jogged over Lake Pleasant and then went kind of slightly west of Anthem in that area.
Well, the one thing I would say, you're referring to it as if it was one object. We have reason to believe that there were, thanks to the very fine work by Jim Delatoso and the late Dr. Michael Tanner, we have solid reason to believe that there were at least 5 objects. And one thing that I like to share with an audience that may have interest in the Phoenix Lights event, a lot of people have been reporting for the last 19 years, well, they were very large, maybe a mile in width. No, I would invite any of our listeners who has experience with trigonometry to do the following calculation. The object that hovered above the Camelback Mountain area for an estimated 5 minutes, Sue Watson and her 4 children sat on her lawn marveling at this huge object that was above them for an estimated 5 minutes before it suddenly jumped and went down towards Sky Harbor Airport. The object was, we have reason to believe, one of the F-15s intercepted the object at 10,500 feet above ground level. Sue Watson has estimated that it subtended as it sat above her home, and they were sitting looking at it, wondering what in God's name is this horrendous craft above their heads. She estimates that it subtended an arc of about 135 degrees. That's enough information to perform trigonometric calculation of its actual width.
Well, you're talking something miles in width.
Not less than 7.4 terrestrial statute miles in width.
You know, just on the surface, it almost sounds like the huge object seen in the movie Independence Day the previous year.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, frightening. Phoenix Lights. We'll
And
have to get into that subject more detail in the future, but there's so much to discuss with you, Peter. I don't want to focus just on this. We want to get back to fireballs for a moment. Chris, there's a long series of questions from Polterwurst about fireballs.
Yeah.
You want to get to some of them now and then maybe a little bit more in our next segment. We have actually about 30 seconds for this segment, so let's just do the break and then we'll get ready to Polterwurst's questions. I mean, we can do a whole show on those because they are so detailed.
Well, we have addressed some of it, so.
Sure, so we can cover some of the rest and keep things going. We want to tell you we have Peter Davenport of the National UFO Reporting Center. The Paracast is closing in on 10 years on the air without interruption. And on next week's episode, we're going to honor that in some way. It's going to be a surprise. We'll get some surprise guests, people you haven't heard in a while, to cover 10 years of the Paracast. With Gene and Chris, you're in
the Paracast.
Thank you for listening to GCN. Visit GCNlive.com today.
Attention citizens. This man has received national attention for accurately predicting every major financial trend, including the market crash of 2008. His name is Harry Dent. And in his newly released book, he is making even bigger and bolder predictions that have the potential to devastate the world economy and your personal wealth. You can get a free copy of Harry Dent's bestseller, The Demographic Cliff, containing never-before-published information by simply visiting www.harrydentresearch.com. Again, that's www.harrydentresearch.com.
Water is the single most important thing your body needs, so you want to be sure it's the best for you and your family. Since 2005, thousands have depended on Berkey purified water. The Berkey Guy provides the lowest priced filtration systems in every size. For incredibly delicious water now and in an emergency, get to GoBerkey.com or call 877-886-3653. 877-886-3653. GoBerkey.com.
Biochemistry determines your mood, memory, energy, and endurance. Your body's primary metabolic function is to make protein. One World Whey is a unique, non-denatured protein. This enables your body to have virtually 100% utilization, whereas typical whey protein powders offer no more than 18% utilization of protein. One World Whey also delivers life-giving frequencies to your cells. The net result for so many people is improved energy, mood, and elimination of pain from inflammation.
This technologically enhanced One World Whey has been really amazing for me. I'm 36 years old, and for the past several years, I've been struggling with lack of energy, drive, and stamina. And after just 2 weeks on this product, I'm feeling so much more energy. My yoga practice has deepened, and as a massage therapist, I'm able to see more clients than I've been able to in years. I've never felt results that quick with anything I've ever taken.
Call 888-988-3325 or visit oneworldwhey.com. That's oneworld, WHEY.com.
Owe $10,000 or more to the IRS?
Get on board with the Tax Admiral. Don't take on the IRS alone. I'll cut penalties and reduce your overall tax bill. Sometimes I can even get it zeroed out completely.
We're an A-rated company helping people clean up their mess with the IRS.
If you owe $10,000 or more, then call the Tax Admiral.
Call 800-287-7180. Again, that's 800-287-7180. 800-287-7180.
Hi, Peter Vaccaro for ParanormalDate.com. Are you looking for love in all the wrong places? Now you have a chance to change that by signing up for free at ParanormalDate.com. This incredible dating site puts people of like minds together. People who are interested in the strange, the unusual, mysteries, ghosts, UFOs, and the afterlife, and so much more. ParanormalDate.com was developed for you, people seeking a viable alternative to the other dating services. You can join for free by going to ParanormalDate.com, and if you decide you like it and want to connect with people, use the code GEORGE for a substantial discount. Mark Rawlings, president of ParanormalDate.com, says so many people hunger to share their experiences about the paranormal, the unexplainable, or the afterlife, and so much more, and this is the source for them to meet and share that common interest. So sign up for free at ParanormalDate.com, ParanormalDate.com, and use the code GEORGE if you decide to connect with someone you like.
Most of you know that heart disease is the #1 silent killer in the U.S. What if I told you for just $54.95 a month you could fight against heart disease naturally? At Heart and Body Extract, we've been helping thousands of people get back to a healthier heart. Don't just take my word for it. Check out all of the success stories at hbextract.com, or to order, call 866-295-5305. That's 866-295-5305. hbextract.com. Don't risk it when you can take charge of it.
This is Micah Hanks of the Gralien Report, and you're listening to the Paracast, the gold standard of paranormal radio.
With Gene and with Chris on the Paracast, we're talking to Peter Davenport of the National UFO Reporting Center. In addition to the focus on the Phoenix Lights, we were also covering fireballs. In relation to that, Chris, there are some questions that you can ask from one of our regulars, Polterwurst.
Yeah, he's one of our dedicated listeners in Germany and a real supporter of the San Luis Valley Camera Project, I might add. And he has a number of questions relating to the fireballs, and he's wondering about Foo Fighters. He says that some descriptions seem to match yellow or reddish fireballs during World War II, and he's wondering if there's a possible connection, or could we be seeing something similar? And or do you think he's asking if you think that this is something else entirely?
Well, it's hard to say. Until we know what the fireballs are, and
Right.
until we know what Foo Fighters are, we can't really compare them very effectively. But they certainly seem somewhat similar in the sense that in both instances, they appeared to the percipients, the witnesses, to be sort of semi-transparent sources of bright illumination. What they are is anybody's guess, but I would remake the point I made earlier in the program. The reason they are so important to us, the reason they're of such great interest, is because we do not know what they are. So it would be inappropriate for me, I feel, predicated on that statement that I've now made twice at the risk of boring our listeners, is it would be inappropriate for me to start making definitive statements as to what they are, what they aren't. I just don't know.
Yeah.
And I'm studying it because I don't know and reporting it to the American people, to anybody who bothers to listen to what I have to say.
Well, yeah, we really can't make a determination. It's even hard to determine whether we're just looking at some sort of plasma ionization effect or whether we're actually looking at a physical craft as opposed to a ball of energy. I've had a small red fireball within 100 feet of me traveling alongside my car over a fairly deep arroyo, and it appeared to be about, I don't know, volleyball sized. Would be probably about the closest between softball and volleyball sized. And, I had a car full of, my band was traveling back from the studio when we saw this. And that definitely looked like some sort of a ball of energy as opposed to some sort of structured craft. Here's another question from Polterwurst. He's wondering, he says there seems to be little footage of lights or light formations behaving anomalously. I've mentioned before an example on YouTube of one daylight videotape that I find very compelling. But he's wondering if researchers or witnesses are keeping footage to themselves. And he says, for example, if I listen to witnesses from Hasdalen, there are many reports of intelligent maneuvers by or some sort of interaction with lights, but not much in terms of video. And we do know they do have video cameras set up there. So he's wondering if people are keeping some of this data under wraps until they can come up with a definitive conclusion.
Hard for me to say. If a person has seen one of these but hasn't reported it, I don't know about it.
Right.
It has to be reported for me to be able to do anything with it. But I'm mildly in disagreement with the claim that there's not good video. I've been posting it for years to our website, video and photos. Just go to UFOcenter.com and scroll down case after case after case after case over the last 4 years and look at the photographs and look at the video. It's almost as if I'm talking to a brick wall some days.
Or into a vacuum.
But I'm collecting the data and posting it free of charge.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure anybody's paying attention.
Yeah.
A few exceptions. Roger Marsh is following our data pretty closely. A few people in MUFON are. I'm sure the government, U.S. government is, with attention riveted to the phenomenon and to the material I post. But I often wonder whether people are paying attention to Hollywood productions. I get calls all the time from people say, Peter, did you see such and such a broadcast? Well, first of all, I don't have a television by choice. Secondly, in some of those cases, I'm actually in the program. So that's certainly the case with regard to the Phoenix Lights from the early publicity about that event. So I would encourage the individual to go to our website, UFOcenter.com, and just start scrolling through posting after posting after posting, no doubt dozens or hundreds of them since May of 2012 make that.
Yeah. Polterwurst also is wondering about Alison Cruz. Are you familiar with her material? She seems to record light phenomenon regularly, but also thinks they, quote unquote, might be camouflaging as normal aircraft.
Well, I'd like to see her data. I'd like to see her reports.
I think she's up from the Pacific Northwest, isn't she? Gene, does that ring a bell?
It doesn't.
I should remember the name, and I
Alison
may
Cruz,
have met her,
Krus.
and I beg forgiveness if I've met her and or seen her data and don't remember. But there are a lot of people who are making a lot of claims, and what distinguishes them from good hard science is evidence. And she may have good footage, but there are a lot of videos I receive of lights. Most of them show lens flares from photographing a bright source of light, either the sun or the moon. That's the traditional type of photo I receive, is a photograph showing a lens flare or video or still photos of Sirius or Venus or any of the other very bright objects in the nighttime sky.
Airplane headlights coming at you with airplanes with landing lights on. I saw that last night. That had me going for about 20 seconds, and then I realized, oh boy, he's coming into the Prescott Airport, and he's just taking a weird sort of jog.
Yeah, I had one of those experiences fairly recently too. Probably a KC-135 was approaching Fairchild Air Force Base here, not too far from where I'm located, and I was watching it for 5 minutes. It was a good long ways away, and it had my attention, and then once it got closer, I could see the strobe lights, and I could see the red and green marker lights on the port and starboard wings. So, but it had my attention for several minutes before I realized what I was looking at.
Right. Well, and that's important to underscore that you really need to observe carefully and from a dispassionate, objective point of view, and wait for it to generally a real sighting, and this is not. This is just kind of a general rule of thumb. A real sighting is much, it happens much more quickly. Venus hanging in the sky and slowly setting in the west should be fairly easy to determine, even for an untrained observer. So, you have to be careful and take notes. I often try to remind my conference audiences and my book readers to keep a dedicated calendar in your office with large squares on it. And if anything anomalous happens in your neighborhood, any strange weather, anything that appears unusual, just make a little note to yourself on your calendar on the day in which it happens. Put the duration, the time, and a brief description of what it is. And this will allow you later on to then refer back and, of course, report any anomalous sightings to Peter. But when you look back later on and you start to realize, wow, there's been some things going on, you have it there written down so that you can immediately, your memory is jogged and you can refer back to these head scratchers that may seem inconsequential at the time. So that's a real good technique that I found works very well. We have some other questions here before we go to break again. And this comes from Ravens Fee.
Let's do the break and then do the question, okay? All right, we have more questions from our listeners, some very, very compelling questions to really advance this discussion. We have Peter Davenport of the National UFO Reporting Center with Gene and Chris. You're in
the Paracast.
You are listening to GCN. Visit GCNlive.com today.
Graphic Converter is the image manipulation tool for the rest of us. It does not use any database. You get full control of all your files. Want to view the images of a folder? Drag it into Graphic Converter and a powerful browser opens up to show your image files. You could use it for slideshows. You could use it to import images from digital cameras or from scanners. Need to do some image editing? You can do that too in Graphic Converter. Also print catalogs. Convert from so many formats I can't even list them. Download now to see if Graphic Converter is good for you, like 1.5 million other users. Guess what? You could save money when you buy Graphic Converter. Use the coupon code Night Owl. Use the coupon code Night Owl to get a special price for Graphic Converter. Go to lemkesoft.com. That's LEMKE soft.com. lemkesoft.com. LEMKE soft.com.
Paid non-attorney spokesperson Adam Pulaski of the Pulaski Law Firm with principal office in Houston, Texas is the attorney responsible for the content of this ad. This ad is not legal advice, and the choice of a lawyer should not be based solely upon advertisement. Services may not be available in all states. Attention Xarelto users. If you or a loved one took Xarelto and suffered a serious bleeding event, you may be entitled to financial compensation. Xarelto is a popular prescription blood thinner used to prevent blood clots and protect patients from strokes. These serious bleeding events have led to numerous cases of hospitalization and even death. Phone lines are open 24/7. Call 800-261-0937. That's 800-261-0937.
We use mobile devices right against our bodies every day, but growing scientific evidence has emerged showing serious health risks associated with exposure to EMF radiation emitted from these devices. The solution is Defender Shield, the most effective mobile radiation shielding ever developed. Defender Shield blocks virtually 100% of EMF radiation from cell phones, tablets, and laptops, and starts at just $64.99. Buy now at DefenderShield.com. For 10% off, use promo code GCN. DefenderShield.com, the worldwide leader in mobile radiation shielding.
Attention citizens. This man has received national attention for accurately predicting every major financial trend, including the market crash of 2008. His name is Harry Dent. And in his newly released book, he is making even bigger and bolder predictions that have the potential to devastate the world economy and your personal wealth. You can get a free copy of Harry Dent's bestseller, The Demographic Cliff, containing never-before-published information by simply visiting www.harrydentresearch.com. Again, that's www.harrydentresearch.com.
As if chlorine in our water weren't bad enough, now they're adding ammonia?
It's true. Some municipalities are now adding ammonia plus chlorine to your water supply. It's a disinfectant called chloramine. But with a trusted Big Berkey water filter, you can keep chloramine out of your water. New NSF EPA certified lab tests show EPA Berkey water filters remove chloramines, pharmaceuticals, BPA, pesticides, bacteria and viruses, all forms of fluoride, and much more. Big Berkey water filters are the original and most trusted on the market. The gold standard in water purification. And our filters last for years at less than 2 cents per gallon. Big Berkey, the one that's powerful enough to purify stagnant pond water. Get your Big Berkey today. Call 1-877-99-BERKEY or click BigBerkeyWaterFilters.com. That's 1-877-99-BERKEY. Big Berkey Water Filters, for the love of clean water.
We all have heard about the benefits of fish oils, but what about the presence of heavy metals, PCBs, dioxins, furans, and other contaminants found in fatty tissues of fish? GCNteam.com recognizes this risk and offers IFOS certified tested omega-3 fatty acids. EPA, DHA insist on IFOS omega-3 fatty acid certification. Get the best at GCNteam.com or call 877-878-4203.
This is Kurt Sutherland, the author of UFO Mysteries, and you're listening to the Paracast.
We continue with your questions from the question bank at forum.theparacast.com. We have Peter Davenport of the National UFO Reporting Center with us. Chris?
Again, this comes from Ravensby. She's a longtime listener from England. And she's wondering, how does the UFO field take advantage of the big data techniques and cheap computing power that are now available to turn UFO reports into meaningful information? In other words, data crunching. We've been hearing about Jacques Vallée wanting to put together the ultimate super database, and from time to time you hear people, make noises like there's some sort of data crunching going on. Have you attempted to do that, Peter? Have you looked at some sort of spreadsheet where you can look at trends, that sort of thing?
Well, I haven't devoted a great deal of time to that for several reasons. Number one, I'm not a computer guru, and I'm too busy taking reports and servicing calls over the hotline and so on and so forth to have time for that. But the other problem is I question whether it's of any use at all. I get requests, probably half a dozen requests every week. People want the database. Well, let me say right out of the blocks that I've spent 22 years and a great deal of my personal fortune collecting 113,000 reports from the public. I'm not anxious just to sign it off to anybody who walks through the door or gives me a call and expresses a desire to have the database, obviously. But the other thing is I know the limitations of the data that are in the database. people find it very difficult, one, as we've discussed already, to submit a report at all. Number two, though, is the question of how accurate they are.
Right.
People are constantly getting the date wrong, the time wrong, getting facts all screwed up. And
garbage in, garbage out.
Garbage in, garbage out. And people who want to take all of those reports and process them is exactly that, and that's the term I usually use in responding to these requests, is it's really a waste of time. What is the purpose of it? And I can see none particularly. People say, well, I want to plot where the sighting occurred and we'll track sightings. Well, if you're getting only 1 out of 20,000 reports, you really don't have a sufficiently large sample of UFO sightings in general to be able to do anything of particular interest or significance. So probably the greatest thing we've done with technology is set up databases and set up online report forms so people shortly after they've seen a UFO can report it while they still remember the facts. So that's probably the greatest thing that the internet has done for us, is allow people to submit written reports very quickly in a timely fashion. Also, of course, we've been using the telephone for a long time, but oral reports over the telephone are almost of no use whatsoever, I find. And the hardest aspect of my job as director of the National UFO Reporting Center is trying to get people to write down the details of their sighting. They want to talk and talk and talk. They'll take an hour of your time talking about their sighting. But when I say, would you please take 5 or 10 or 15 minutes to write all these facts down, that's when you hit the brick wall. I've never seen so many excuses in all my life as to why a person cannot write down the facts that they want to take an hour to tell you over the telephone. So I'm digressing here a little bit, but the internet is probably the greatest boon to the UFO field. One of the things I would like to address, a lot of people are saying, well, we should use all these cell telephones that are out there for photographing objects and reporting them and communicating about a given sighting. Well, I've received a lot of those reports from cell telephone owners, and more often than not, the quality of those reports is not very good. They don't take the time to craft a written statement with all of the details, where they were, what the time and date were, what direction they were looking, the angle of elevation, how big the object appeared to be relative to a star, a planet, or a full moon in the sky. That's what we need, is the carefully prepared report, not the hastily submitted report. So technology may be actually becoming a hindrance to the quality of UFO reports.
Well, here's a question from William Stratham, and it involves trace case incidents in recent years. Oh, yeah. As an aside, it seems to me, based on my limited finger on the pulse of sighting events, that we're seeing less and less landings, and that objects are tending to be reported, I think, less. We have less reports of objects in close proximity to witnesses. They seem to be staying further away or something. Is there truth to that? And have we had any real good quality landing in trace cases recently?
Well, I just covered one last week on a late-night radio talk show about a gentleman in Colorado Springs who alleges to have had some kind of event occur in his bedroom where he and his wife and their pet dog were sleeping. My suspicion is that those cases are taking place, but it's very difficult, as I've reported already, to get people to report these. Oftentimes they're so confused and flabbergasted by what they've experienced that they just don't report them. But there are a lot of cases that I've covered and presented on radio of sightings of objects that appeared to have been very close to the witness. I can think of a whole bunch of them. One in particular comes from Oklahoma, northern Oklahoma. A woman was in a fog bank driving on an interstate, and suddenly the fog surrounding her turned orange. And just about that time, she drove out of the cloud of fog, and here are a number of orange objects hovering directly above the interstate ahead of her. And her illustration that she provided to our center is posted on our homepage. But I think those events are taking place. It's just that it's very difficult to get people to sit down and say, yep, I'm going to report this one to an authority that can use it and post it and let the world know about it.
That leads me to think here that the agencies, the private agencies that are set up to collect UFO information, maybe aren't getting the word out. I kind of thought that MUFON would stand some success with that TV show, but it doesn't seem to be working that way.
Yeah. Well, the problem is people have to be motivated, and trying to motivate people is one of the most difficult jobs that any human being has. People have to, first of all, recognize that they've seen something that is unusual and deserves reporting. Then they have to be sufficiently motivated to find an organization like the National UFO Reporting Center or MUFON where they can report it. And then they have to sit down and write it out and spell check it and copy and paste it into the form. This amount of work is a hurdle, an insurmountable barrier for many people.
Also, the fact is that you don't see as much coverage of UFO cases in the media, and we don't have print media like we used to have. It's all online, so it's ephemeral. It's not something where you get the daily newspaper, and it sits there and it says UFO seen in the next town over, and that's something you could refer to. But if you see a website with that information, well, you go to the next site, and maybe you don't get back to it. The permanence of news is history.
Yeah, that's right. The nature of the news industry has changed dramatically in the last quarter century, and I'm not sure it benefits accurate, meaningful reporting of the UFO phenomenon. As you point out, and I think it's a good observation, is news today is ephemeral. You can see a report 1 minute, and you try to go back to it 10 minutes later, and it's gone.
And this happens with my wife all the time. She sees something on TV on one of the cable news networks, and she says, look that up. And maybe I'll even go to the site that organization runs.
Yeah.
And the site will be disorganized. It won't be up to date. The same people who are updating the news on the TV show are not necessarily updating the site. And when they do, it's buried away somewhere that you have to find it. And again, there's no printed copy. We seem to think that's important. There's so much information out there.
Yep.
But if you have the printed copy sitting there, the morning fish wrapper doesn't exist anymore like it used to. And if it does, it's thinner. There's less coverage. The staff is smaller because there's not enough advertising. So therefore, there's only so much content they could print affordably. We got a lot more to cover as we continue with Peter Davenport of the National UFO Reporting Center. With Gene and Chris, you're in
the Paracast.
Thank you for listening to GCN. Be sure to visit GCNlive.com today.
First came Attack of the Rockoids, and it was a critically acclaimed success. And now there's The Coming of the Protectors. A former military intelligence man is contacted by a space woman in a dream that turns out to be a nightmare because evil forces on her distant planet are planning to conquer the Earth. This is gripping science fiction of the classic kind. Attack of the Rockoids and The Coming of the Protectors. Find out more at rockoids.com. That's Rockoids, ROCKOIDS.com.
As you know, neighbors, web hosting can be pretty cheap, but not all hosting is the same. DreamHost wins Best of Awards year after year. You get unlimited disk space, unlimited bandwidth, and even the low-cost plans put your sites on high-performance SSDs. Want to know more about what DreamHost has to offer? Go to technightowl.com/host. Once again, that's technightowl.com/host.
Are you worried about your mom or dad living alone in their house? Hi, I'm Joan London. Listen, I know how difficult it is to find senior care for someone you love. That's why I recommend a free service called A Place for Mom. They are the nation's largest senior living referral service. Call A Place for Mom today.
To receive free information on senior living communities in your area, call A Place for Mom at 1-800-704-6182.
A Place for Mom offers free one-on-one advice from local advisors and a personalized list of senior living communities you can visit. If you have questions about senior care for your mom or dad, there's a place for answers, A Place for Mom.
Call A Place for Mom in the next 10 minutes to get your free ebook on financing senior care as well as free information on senior living communities in your area. Call 1-800-704-6182. That's 1-800-704-6182.
Welcome back to the Paracast, the gold standard of paranormal radio. And now, here's Gene Steinberg.
With Gene and Chris in the Paracast, we have Peter Davenport of the National UFO Reporting Center. And we've had some questions about databases, so let's look at that briefly here. So we have huge amounts of data that you have collected over the years, MUFON, all this information. Are there efforts to put everything in one big place? I mean, with computer systems nowadays and advanced apps, it should be easy to stick this all in one location. What about it?
Yeah, well, on the face of it, that's a reasonable proposal, but I invite you to consider how it looks from the vantage point of a person like me who spent 22 years and a great deal of money collecting over about 112,000 cases or 113,000 cases now. And somebody comes along and says, we'd like your database for no compensation, no remuneration, no thanks, and so on and so forth. And it's the human factor that's involved in that. Plus, from a technical standpoint, from a scientific standpoint, all of those reports have been collected by different systems, and that creates a problem from the standpoint of continuity or consistency. So, yeah, everybody would like access to my database. They want me to just send a copy of it to them over the internet, and I'm not prepared to do that, and I doubt that MUFON would do that as well.
Well, we know MUFON won't do it, but the problem here is we have separate actors here collecting information with their own information database. And wouldn't there be a better chance of figuring out what's going on if we could pool our resources somehow? I understand the limitations. I understand, look, you've spent your own money on this project. You just don't want to give away your work. But for the greater good, how do we get it all together and figure out what's going on?
Well, the problem is the problem we alluded to earlier, and that is trying to analyze this data through the use of computers. Again, the big hurdles are the accuracy of the data in the first place. And number two is the lack of consistency as to how it has been collected. We all have different questionnaires. On the surface of it, on the face of it, it's a reasonable proposal. It's when you get into the actual machinations of doing it that I think you quickly see that there's very little to be gained by computer analysis of UFO reports because they're so heterogeneous. And the big issue, again, is the issue of date and time. Most people, again, if it's been more than a day or two since their sighting, don't remember the date. And so trying to analyze all this data when the data is not accurate in the first place, the term, again, garbage in, garbage out comes to mind. I'm not sure there's a great deal to be gained by it.
So what do we do with it? How do we take all this stuff that's been accumulated and try to get some answers? Because right now, as far as I'm concerned, we really don't have answers. We just have loads and loads of mysteries.
I answered that question over 22 years ago with my proposal to use passive radar to detect UFOs.
I want to get into that, but go ahead.
This, exactly what you said, occurred to me 22 years ago, just a few months after I'd taken over the National UFO Reporting Center. I actually panicked, was in a panic state about January of 1995. I took over the hotline in August of 94. And when I took it over, I really didn't know what I was doing to myself and to my outlook on what reality may be, because I had no idea how much work it was going to be. When I accepted responsibility for the hotline from Bob Gribble, its founder, I assumed that I might be taking 1 or 2 or maybe 3 calls per week, not very many at all, easily managed. Before I knew it, I was taking 1, 2, or 3 dozen calls per day. So I was taking about 2 orders of magnitude more information than I assumed would be the case. In January of 1995, in fact, I can pin it down, it was the Friday before Martin Luther King weekend, I was asking myself, how could we analyze the UFO phenomenon more efficiently and using technology rather than weak eyewitness reports and fuzzy photographs? And that is when it hit me that we could use what is known as passive radar, a phenomenon that militaries have been working on for decades, to remotely detect the presence of a UFO, and not only detect its presence, but track the UFO, calculate its altitude, its velocity, maybe to a degree its size. And I wrote a paper for the MUFON Journal on the use of passive radar. I called it Meteor Communications Radar, or Meteor Detection Radar. At the time, I really didn't know what it was called in the industry. And I published an article in the MUFON Journal, and it was about 3 months before I even received a comment about the article. Here I have solved the problem of detecting UFOs, not using eyewitnesses, not using photographs, and it didn't create a stir or a ripple in all of ufology, apparently. And I've been talking about this technology, and I'll describe it here in a minute if you like.
Sure.
For 22 years, been trying to raise the funds to build a prototype. Prototypes already exist for other applications, for detecting aircraft, commercial aircraft, for detecting the trails, the ionized trails behind meteors. And I have had about 0 success in generating interest, even in MUFON. July of 2008, during the MUFON Symposium, I had a telephone link-up with the director, the international director, and a bunch of state directors to describe the technology once again to MUFON and to offer some kind of collaboration, and it came to naught. But it turns out that as you and I are talking on this program is being radiated out, I presume, off of an antenna. And that signal, that electromagnetic signal, is being radiated in all directions.
It's more complicated than that. Really more complicated than that, Peter. The actual broadcast center sends it by satellite. It's picked up by the local stations.
Sure.
And then they broadcast them to the listeners. But we also have the show online. So anyone online with access to iTunes or TuneIn or goes to the Paracast.com can download the episode.
Yeah.
Not so simple.
I accept that the actual administration of the program is much more complicated than I understand at this moment. However, ultimately, somewhere, sometime, the program, or any other program, doesn't matter whether it's this one or a commercial radio station or television station, is broadcasting a signal off an antenna.
Exactly. That's about 24 stations around the U.S.
For your program, but there are hundreds or thousands of radio or television stations across the United States that we could use. They broadcast a signal. It's radiated out in the form of radio or television waves. They're all the same, of course. And that electromagnetic radiation radiates in all directions, goes out in space. If, however, there's something up above that radio station that reflects radio waves, then you can build an array of antennas that will receive the reflected signal. That's what we're looking for, is the reflection of the radiated signal.
We're assuming then that UFOs, whatever they might be, and we have to break for a few moments shortly, we're assuming then that they will reflect something, not just light, that we could see them, but they will reflect something that we can detect, at least directly or indirectly, and therefore know of their presence. Am I getting it right? Don't answer now. Just hold on for a second.
We'll pick it up after the break.
We'll talk about passive radar and UFO detection systems, and I will bring up others who are trying to do some kind of UFO detection program, such as UFO data. I'm going to ask you about that after we get to cover yours. With Peter Davenport of the National UFO Reporting Center, you're on with Gina and Chris. You're in
the Paracast.
If you're fascinated by UFOs, ancient aliens, archaeological mysteries, ghost hunting, Atlantis, and any other paranormal topic as we are, be sure to check out apmagazine.info each month. Since 1985, it has presented the latest research by top researchers like Andrew Collins, Brad Steiger, and many others, and contains interviews with such leading personalities as Jacques Vallée. Click on one of their banners and check out apmagazine.info. As you know, neighbors, web hosting can be pretty cheap, but not all hosting is the same. DreamHost wins Best of Awards year after year. You get unlimited disk space, unlimited bandwidth, and even the low-cost plans put your sites on high-performance SSDs. Want to know more about what DreamHost has to offer? Go to technightowl.com/host. Once again, that's technightowl.com/host.
I'm Nick Soboleski, a Select Quote agent with a true story that could save you hundreds of dollars a year. A woman named Linda just called. Her husband, Ray, has a $300,000 group life insurance policy, but is changing jobs and can't take it with him. Well, I impartially shopped the highly rated term life insurance companies we represent and found Ray, who is 41 and takes medication to control his cholesterol, a 10-year, $500,000 policy for under $26 a month. That's almost twice the coverage for less than half of what he had paid. If SelectQuote hasn't shopped for your life insurance, you're probably paying too much.
For your free quote, call 1-800-403-4885. That's 1-800-403-4885. 1-800-403-4885. Or go to SelectQuote.com. We shop, you save. Get full details in the example policy at SelectQuote.com/commercials. Your price could vary depending on your health, issuing company, and other factors. Not available in all states.
Are your Google search results killing you? Unflattering content in blogs, news articles, online reviews, social media, or other sources can jeopardize your reputation, your business, and your livelihood. Let Reputation.com help. Our patented technology will make the truth about you more visible while pushing down unwanted negative content. Improve your Google search results. Call Reputation.com at 1-800-831-0771 for a free consultation. That's 800-831-0771.
Hello, my name is Don Wiskin from HeartDrop.com, the distributors of Extendivite, the #1 heart drop that people have been raving about for years. Every February for the last 16 years, HeartDrop.com has had a Heart Month sale to help you stay heart healthy. For only $115 plus shipping and handling, you can get a 4-month supply of Extendivite in either liquid or capsule form to help you get started on your path to better health. Now is the time to stock up. Order what you need. Stay heart healthy all year with the #1 heart drop, Extendivite. To order your Extendivite, call 1-877-928-8822. That's 1-877-928-8822. Or visit our website, heartdrop.com.
Extend your life with Extendovite.
owe $10,000 or more to the IRS?
Get on board with the Tax Admiral. Don't take on the IRS alone. I'll cut penalties and reduce your overall tax bill. Sometimes I can even get it zeroed out completely.
We're an A-rated company helping people clean up their mess with the IRS.
If you owe $10,000 or more, then call the Tax Admiral.
Call 800-287-7180. Again, that's 800-287-7180. 800-287-7180.
We'd like to hear from you. If you have a comment or question about the Paracast, send it to news@theparacast.com. That's news@theparacast.com. And don't forget to visit our famous Paracast community forums at forum.theparacast.com.
So on the Paracast with Gene and Chris, we have Peter Davenport of the National UFO Reporting Center. Question on the table: with a passive detection system, we have to assume then, for the sake of argument, that UFOs are reflecting something we can detect in that way.
Yeah. Well, that's a reasonable assumption because we know from radar visual cases that at least some UFOs reflect radio waves, reflect radar signals. No doubt about that whatsoever. So based on that, we know that we can detect some UFOs using a passive radar system. Let me describe one as an example for our listeners so they can understand what I'm proposing here. I live about 200 miles east of Seattle, and there's a range of mountains, the Cascade Mountains, between me and Seattle. So if I tune a radio to one of the radio or television stations in Seattle, let's use a radio station, under virtually all circumstances, I am unable to tune that radio to be able to hear that transmitted signal. One, because of the distance, and number two, because there are mountains between me and the radio transmitter or radio antenna that prevent that signal from reaching the antenna on my receiver here 200 miles east of Seattle. However, if something flies over the Cascade Mountains, an airplane, a flock of migratory birds, a metallized balloon, or something along those lines, it is in line of sight of not only the radio antenna, the radio transmitter antenna, but my receiver antennas as well, and it will reflect that transmitted signal. So suddenly my antennas are picking up the signal from 200 miles away. I think this is pretty straightforward, nothing complicated about this. Then what you can do, if you have an array of antennas that allow you to triangulate on the source of that reflected signal, you can track it. You can measure its location 10 or 100 times a second, and you can calculate its velocity, you can calculate its location, you can calculate to a degree its size, depending on the frequency of the transmitted and reflected signals. You can essentially detect something. Now again, that something could be an airliner, it could be a satellite up outside the Earth's atmosphere, it could be a flock of migratory birds, or any number of things reflect signals. This is why weather radar is very useful, because rain clouds and tornadoes and all sorts of meteorological phenomena reflect radar signals. But then you can start to discriminate. If it's moving at 500 knots and it's at 30,000 feet, it's probably an airliner. If it's at, say, 5,000 feet and it's moving at 45 miles an hour, it's probably a flock of geese. However, if it's at 50 miles above the surface of the planet and it's doing 20,000 kilometers a second and it does a right-angle turn, it's probably not a Canadian goose. So that is what I've proposed. I've been talking about this phenomenon and technology for 22 years and have had essentially no interest in it. It absolutely flabbergasts and frustrates me that nobody seems to be paying attention. Most people want to continue talking about bad UFO reports and fuzzy photographs rather than doing the hard work to have a UFO detection system that would allow a person to sit in front of his computer screen and watch for actual UFOs flying in that person's proximity, say within 1,000 miles or so.
You're aware of the UFO Data Project from Mark Roediger and Leslie Kane and several others?
Yeah.
So how do you feel your project might coordinate with theirs? If we're going to do this, we're going to do it somehow.
Well, they should be aware of my technology, and I'm probably remiss in not having contacted them to make sure that they're aware of my proposal. PhD scientists have contacted me and said, whoa, that's a better mousetrap, Peter. It will work. I've worked on passive radar systems before. Why they haven't included me in that community of advocates for detecting UFOs, I don't know. But again, it may be I who has been remiss in not contacting them. I've been aware of their project for several months now. I just haven't sent them a communication to apprise them of my technology, but they should be aware of it. I've been talking about it for 22 years. In 2004, I lectured on the technology. I devoted my whole presentation before the MUFON Symposium in Denver, July of 2004, to this subject. If they're not aware of the technology that I've proposed, they may not be paying too close attention to the UFO field.
Why assume anything? Why don't you, and this is your assignment, should you decide to accept it, contact them, tell them what you have, give them a couple of references, maybe they could look it up, and see if there's a way to coordinate efforts, because right now nothing's happening. You made this proposal years ago, it's not being picked up. And they're making a proposal for which they'd like donations to set up UFO detection systems. Now, obviously, theirs doesn't read to me like passive radar, but I'm not an engineer. It doesn't matter. Someone's trying to do something. Don't you think we all have to work together?
I've already proposed it to MUFON. I think several of those people are probably members of MUFON. They get the MUFON Journal. I've published 2 articles on the subject for MUFON. But your point is well taken. And as I prefaced by this at this remark, I'm probably remiss in not having communicated with them. Right now, I'm in overwhelmed condition. I work 2 shifts a day, 7 days a week, for no pay, to process the flow of reports that are coming to me and to get them posted so people can share in them.
Yes, but right now, and I'm going to be the devil's advocate here, all those reports aren't doing anything for anyone. It's just a source of information.
I disagree.
Well, all right, but what is being done to take that information and bring us to some answers? Just having 100,000 sightings, where's that taking us?
Well, for one thing, you haven't talked to the people who call the hotline and say, boy, you don't know how relieved I am, Mr. Davenport, for me to be able to read a report in which a person describes something very similar to what I just saw 10 minutes ago.
Okay, so we're basically making people feel good about their sightings. Oh, I'm not alone. All these people have reported things. Here's all the data. That's fine. So we make people feel better. They're not alone in having experiences of this nature. But at this point, from what you're telling me, this data is very imperfect, very incomplete, because we can't get everything together because of the imprecision of human observation. The only way to get answers, more than likely, is to have some way to catch UFOs in the act, unless they do something overt to make their existence known in a way they can't be denied, and we find out what they are. I'm going to ask you to have that answer, and hold on for just a second. Peter Davenport of the National UFO Reporting Center is joining us with Gene and Chris. You're in
the Paracast.
Thank you for listening to GCN. Be sure to visit GCNlive.com today.
No other network provides the level of customer service we do. When it comes to radio advertising, we are your one-stop shop. And no matter how big or small your business is, we can help. Email us at advertise@gcnlive.com, and an experienced advertising executive will help you take the first step towards driving more customers to your business or website. Advertise at gcnlive.com. Easy, affordable, effective.
Attention citizens. This man has received national attention for accurately predicting every major financial trend, including the market crash of 2008. His name is Harry Dent. And in his newly released book, he is making even bigger and bolder predictions that have the potential to devastate the world economy and your personal wealth. You can get a free copy of Harry Dent's bestseller, The Demographic Cliff, containing never-before-published information by simply visiting www.harrydentresearch.com. Again, that's www.harrydentresearch.com.
It's about time something new came along for better selling and buying online. And I found it.
What now, Marge?
It's buysellmakeoffer.com.
Never heard of it.
It's a brand new company. That's why you've never heard of it. It's the newest and best way to sell any products online. I did all the research.
Sell my car?
Yes.
Our home?
Yep.
My golf bag?
Your golf clubs. All of them.
How about your purse collection hoard?
Hey, now.
You said any product.
Right. I did. We get 30 days free.
Really?
Packages starting from only $7.95. And buysellmakeoffer.com will never charge item fees ever. Never. And this is cool. Listen to this. You can even use Skype or video to show your items.
That's cool.
Yes. All we have to do is go to the website, sign up, and then load our stuff to sell. I love this site.
Buysellmakeoffer.com.
Buysellmakeoffer.com. You got it?
Buysellmakeoffer.com.
Buysellmakeoffer.com. Better selling, better buying.
Most of you know that heart disease is the #1 silent killer in the U.S. What if I told you for just $54.95 a month you could fight against heart disease naturally? At Heart and Body Extract, we've been helping thousands of people get back to a healthier heart. Don't just take my word for it. Check out all of the success stories at hbextract.com, or to order, call 866-295-5305. That's 866-295-5305. hbextract.com. Don't risk it when you can take charge of it.
This is a healthcare alert from the Pain Relief Hotline. If you, a family member, or a loved one suffers from knee, back, shoulder, or ankle pain and have Medicare as your primary insurance, we've got great news. You don't have to suffer any longer. You can immediately qualify for a pain-relieving brace at little or no cost to you by calling our 24/7 Pain Relief Hotline at 866-389-0620. Delivery is free and all paperwork is handled for you. If you are on Medicare and have knee, back, shoulder, or ankle pain, don't wait. You can qualify to immediately receive a pain-relieving brace at little or no cost by calling our 24/7 Pain Hotline now at 866-389-0620. Our representatives are standing by 24/7 to take your call and rush you your pain-relieving brace at little or no cost to you. Shipping is free and all paperwork is handled for you. Just call 866-389-0620. That's 866-389-0620. Again, 866-389-0620.
By now you know that wireless technology like cell phones do in fact pose dangers to the health and privacy of everyone. Blockit Pocket's wide range of products are unmatched in providing the protection you deserve. No scare tactics, just common sense. BlockitPocket.com offers quality American-made options to alleviate and eliminate these invisible dangers. Learn more at BlockitPocket.com or call 888-315-9618. BlockitPocket.com, enhancing health and privacy.
This is Micah Hanks of the Gray Alien Report, and you're listening to the Paracast, the gold standard of paranormal radio.
I raised the devil's advocate question here. Peter Davenport, the National UFO Reporting Center. I know you have a response.
Yeah, of course I do. Your question is a good one, and I have a good answer for you. We can do everything you advocate if we have a staff and a budget. Do you have a staff and budget for us?
I don't have a staff and budget for me.
I'm in the same condition, Gene. You've gone to the heart of the issue. Everything I've done over the last 22 years at the National UFO Reporting Center, almost everything has been funded almost exclusively by me, with the exception of a few honoraria, a few grants from generous organizations and so on. I've been fundraising continuously, or attempting to raise funds, for 22 years. The only problem with that is I've been unsuccessful in having done so. I've been to 4 billionaires, I've been to a number of organizations, I've been to a number of universities requesting some kind of support, whatever they want, even if it's just setting up a section in their university library dedicated to UFOs. I've had zero success. I've been to Bigelow, I've been to Gates, I've been to Allen, I've been to Rockefeller, and I don't know what these people are thinking. They profess interest in UFOs. However, they don't seem to be willing to make even a small amount of money available that would allow us to vastly increase our capability and our scope of activities. So your question is a good one, and it's very readily stated and easily stated. My response is, if you think that we could be doing more, provide me with the resource that will allow me to do it.
But you won't give it off to a scientific organization who contacted you and said, look, we don't have a lot of money, but we've got eager beavers who are willing to go through your data and try to find something. Would you give it to them?
Well, would you give your archives to the next person who contacts you and wants control of them?
Well, the archives are freely available to download.
And all of my data is available on the website for people to share in. But I would like to know the details of how the data will be used, how it will be protected, how the identities of the people who submitted the data will be protected so they're not featured in a front-page article in a major newspaper. That's the special responsibility I have. MUFON has the same responsibility. But your point is a good one, but I again invite you to consider the human factor involved. People, after they've spent 22 years of their lives, in my case, and a great deal of their treasury to collect the data, are not willing to just give it away willy-nilly to the first person who saunters by and says, I want that database.
I understand they have to do a lot of legwork and make steps to protect the people. But when you come to an organization like MUFON that has hundreds, thousands of people who are paid members, field investigators, they're not doing a thing with their data. Forget about you. You're one lone actor.
Oh, they are.
MUFON is doing nothing that I could see. What is MUFON doing to put that together and figure out what's going on? What do they know about UFOs that they didn't know in 1969?
I think MUFON is doing a great job with informing the public of what's going on. The first step in any scientific process or investigation is first to collect data. Now, how much we can do with that data and how convincing it may be to some people, I cannot predict, but they're doing exactly what any scientist should be doing, and that is assessing what's going on out there. If you have a theory that all fish are golden trout, the first thing you have to do is go in to a lake or any body of water and start fishing and capturing fish to test your theory. You quickly discover that not all fish are golden trout. There are other types of fishes, as an example. I cite that as a fisheries biologist.
Okay, but MUFON has been around 47 years with this data, all right? And there's still a basic operating theory that they work under.
Yeah.
That's implicit, which is that UFOs are probably visitors from other planets.
Mm-hmm.
But what have they done to be able to advance this theory, to provide more information and evidence? I don't see it being there. I see they're collecting information, they're publicizing it, they're holding conferences with plus or minus with the quality of guests. I don't think they're going anywhere at all.
Well,
and that's my criticism of them.
Yeah.
After 47 years, show me something.
Well, they're limited by budget, as am I. And I've just described what we could do to do precisely what you've just described. Take it to a new level. Passive radar does that. It takes the eyewitness out of the link of data. It puts photographs on the shelf. Most photos of UFOs are not very good. In fact, I estimate that only about 1 out of 1,000 photographs sent to the National UFO Reporting Center is of any value or use or interest at all. But passive radar will do exactly what you say.
Let me move on. I'm being a devil's advocate here, but understand where I'm going. We're trying to figure things out. So theoretically, then, we set up passive radar tomorrow. Someone says, okay, Peter, here's $1 million, whatever it takes. You could pretty much take all your data that you've accumulated so far and stick it in the drawer and start all over again, because that's what you have to do. You're setting up a program to detect UFO activity and figure out what's going on. But that doesn't reference what's already there. It's starting something new from scratch.
Yeah, it is. It's a new, you've just proposed. How do we take it to a new level? That's going to a new domain, Gene. That's exactly what I want to do.
So therefore,
graduate from collecting eyewitness reports to having a radar detection system that will tell us when a UFO is in proximity of the detection system and what its size is, what its velocity is. That's exactly what I want to do. I want to take it to a new level. It may make all the data we've collected obsolete, but that would be fine with me.
Okay, now, if we're detecting the activity, will we have things like cameras, movie cameras, other sensors to get the visual information?
Yeah, I wrote an article on precisely that question. All you have to do is slave the passive radar system to a cinetheodolite, that is a movie camera that is on a gimbaled tripod, and be able to point the camera in the direction of the object, and you stand a chance of capturing it on film. But again, photographs are not terribly convincing. Photographs directed or taken by a passive radar system would be a step in the right direction. But I've proposed what I feel is the solution to the question mark about UFOs. Are they real or are they not? Clearly they are from my vantage point. Now I want to prove it, and I've proposed the use of technology that could satisfy that question. And I'm not sure many people are paying attention.
Now, I assume a system like this would be designed to consider possible false positives.
Well, I don't understand. Yeah, there would be many false positives. You would detect airliners, you would detect satellites, you would detect migratory birds. And there are two stages in radar. One is the first stage is detection. The second stage is discrimination. What have you detected? Is it of any interest to the system? And that's what's is very easily done with computers and modern electronics. It's only been the last 10, at most 20 years that private citizens have had access to the kind of computer power you need to be able to do what I've advocated. There are a number of passive radar systems in use today. In fact, the British air traffic control system is proposing going to a passive radar system because it's much more reliable and much more accurate than the active radar systems when they generate a beam and send it out to detect targets in the vicinity of the transmitter.
Let's do our break, and we'll come back for the final segment with Peter Davenport of the National UFO Reporting Center. With Gene and Chris, you're in
the Paracast.
Thank you for listening to GCN. Visit GCNlive.com today.
Graphic Converter is the image manipulation tool for the rest of us. It does not use any database. You get full control of all your files. Want to view the images of a folder? Drag it into Graphic Converter, and a powerful browser opens up to show your image files. You could use it for slideshows. You could use it to import images from digital cameras or from scanners. Need to do some image editing? You can do that too in Graphic Converter. Also print catalogs. Convert from so many formats, I can't even list them. Download now to see if Graphic Converter is good for you, like 1.5 million other users. Guess what? You could save money when you buy Graphic Converter. Use the coupon code Night Owl. Use the coupon code Night Owl to get a special price for Graphic Converter. Go to lemkesoft.com. That's Lemke soft.com. Lemkesoft.com. Lemke soft.com.
Paid non-attorney spokesperson Adam Pulaski of the Pulaski Law Firm with principal office in Houston, Texas is the attorney responsible for the content of this ad. This ad is not legal advice, and the choice of a lawyer should not be based solely upon advertisement. Services may not be available in all states. Attention Xarelto users. If you or a loved one took Xarelto and suffered a serious bleeding event, you may be entitled to financial compensation. Xarelto is a popular prescription blood thinner used to prevent blood clots and protect patients from strokes. These serious bleeding events have led to numerous cases of hospitalization and even death. Phone lines are open 24/7. Call 800-261-0937. That's 800-261-0937.
Today, more than ever, it's imperative that you protect your digital privacy. EDEC Digital Forensics, Signal Blocking, Anti-Radiation, Anti-Surveillance Faraday bags shield the contents of your phones, tablets, and key fobs from 4G, Wi-Fi, GPS, Bluetooth, NFC, and more. Find us at edecdf.com/radio or call us now at 805-222-4584. That's 805-222-4584. Radio listeners get 20% off your order.
This is Dan Pilla. Do you owe the IRS money you can't pay? Are tax debts crippling you? I've defended people from the IRS for over 30 years. I've helped thousands, and I can help you too. I wrote the book on IRS settlement, and I'm telling you, there's no such thing as a hopeless case. Call 800-34-NO-TAX to finally get free of IRS debt. With the IRS's new programs, there's never been a better time to solve your problem. Call 800-34-NO-TAX. That's 800-34-NO-TAX, or my website, danpilla.com.
Hi, Peter Vaccaro for ParanormalDate.com. Are you looking for love in all the wrong places? Now you have a chance to change that by signing up for free at ParanormalDate.com. This incredible dating site puts people of like minds together. People who are interested in the strange, the unusual, mysteries, ghosts, UFOs, and the afterlife, and so much more. ParanormalDate.com was developed for you, people seeking a viable alternative to the other dating services. You can join for free by going to ParanormalDate.com, and if you decide you like it and want to connect with people, use the code GEORGE for a substantial discount. Mark Rawlings, president of ParanormalDate.com, says so many people hunger to share their experiences about the paranormal, the unexplainable, or the afterlife, and so much more, and this is the source for them to meet and share that common interest. So sign up for free at ParanormalDate.com, ParanormalDate.com, and use the code GEORGE if you decide to connect with someone you like.
My dad was 59 when he collapsed from a heart attack late last year. Just this past August was when we spread his ashes on the St. Croix River. I loved my dad, but boy was he stubborn. He hadn't been to the doctor in over 25 years. His excuse? He simply couldn't afford it. He wasn't a rich man by any means. At less than $107 per month, LibertyOnCall.org would have been the perfect alternative for my father. Don't wait. Go to LibertyOnCall.org right now, for not just your sake, but for the sake of your loved ones. Again, that's LibertyOnCall.org.
Hey, this is Marie D. Jones, the author of This Book is from the Future, and you are listening to the Paracast, the gold standard of paranormal radio.
We have Peter Davenport at the National UFO Reporting Center. We're talking about his proposal for a passive radar UFO detection system, some way to catch them in the act. And just to put this in the overview before we go on to some final questions, as our listeners know, Chris O'Brien has the San Luis Valley Camera Project, setting up a network of cameras to record unusual activity. We have the UFO Data Project from Mark Roediger, Leslie Kane, and others. They're trying to set up their project, and maybe through all this, something can be done. But I understand your frustration here. You have a great idea to do something 22 years ago. The technology has reached a point now where it becomes far more affordable. But when you try to generate interest, it's crickets. Let's just leave it be there. For those who want to know, we'll have our listeners contact you, and I'll ask that in a moment. Let's look at UFOs and theories and events very quickly before we let you go. Now, obviously, one very, very controversial aspect of the UFO phenomenon is abductions. And last week we featured Whitley Strieber, and we've had other discussions with Kathleen Martin and others about abductions. Now, if abductions are real, wouldn't that be a first-hand way of getting a hold of some evidence? But all we really have for the most part are just a bunch of claims. What do you think?
What do you define as evidence?
Some people claim to have alien implants or have other possible physical interactions with aliens. So how do we evaluate claims of this sort?
Okay, let's start with Travis Walton. In my opinion, the Travis Walton case competes with the Phoenix Lights event as being the most dramatic, well-documented case in the history of ufology. He was hit with a beam of light that rendered him unconscious, possibly even dead, in front of 6 witnesses. That's pretty good evidence. The only thing I would wish for is that one of those 6 witnesses in the International Harvester truck had a camera or a movie camera. I regret that they didn't get hard evidence. The other case I would cite, and I've talked about it until I'm blue in the face, and very few people are aware of it, is the death of Todd Sees. It's an event that occurred back in 2002. It was Sunday, August 4th, 2002. People can read the reports on our website. A man went up on a mountain in south central Pennsylvania on an all-terrain vehicle, ATV. The next thing anybody knew, at least 4 witnesses were watching a man's body being levitated off the top of the mountain where Todd Sees was known to have gone into a saucer-shaped metallic-looking craft hovering above the top of that mountain. The man's body, clad only in undergarments, was allegedly taken into the craft. Well, that's the prelude to a long series of events that involved a manhunt involving 200 or 250 people looking for him. And 40 hours after the sighting, reported by several people, his remains were found suspended in a tree or heavy underbrush. Richard Dolan and I and Travis Walton are all familiar with this case. We've looked into it. So we have evidence, very good evidence, that a man possibly was taken up into a saucer and his grossly mutilated remains were found 40 hours later. I don't know what stronger evidence a person would need with regard to the abduction phenomenon, and in this case, tragically, involved not only an abduction but an apparent death and mutilation. Are you familiar with the case?
I've heard about possible human mutilations, yes.
Well, the Todd Sees case, it's a very, very dramatic case. I've talked to the coroner who did the autopsy. He admitted that the autopsy was done. It was a very strange case. We have witnesses that testified to the fact that the man was apparently the very man whose remains were later found was being taken up into a saucer-shaped craft. So I cite this case, Chris, just to point out that we do have good cases. And we've published them, posted them, shared them on radio and television programs, and most people still are not aware of them.
I think part of the problem we're dealing with here is that most people, I don't say Paracast listeners because we have a really dedicated, brilliant group of people who listen to the show. We have well over 100,000 listeners overall around the world. I don't even know the numbers because the show just goes far and wide everywhere. But most people who hear about UFOs, they see the reality shows, they think it's all a bunch of entertainment. It's X-Files. Mm-hmm. That's it. It's just X-Files. It's nothing real. And we could watch that